Hello everybody and welcome to our third installment for this year's JanuYaoi. So, man, the last two installments have been really good. We started out with Fake. I loved that OVA. I went back and read the manga. It's wonderful. And then last week we had Winter Cicada, which was really sad, but really good. So I obviously have not read the manga for Winter Cicada, but it's on my to-do list because that OVA, the 3-part OVA series, it was wonderful. I absolutely loved it. So we're doing for this week something that's been requested for quite some time. And when I first started this channel, I was reviewing Given and Toilet Bound Hanako-kun, and I had a lot of people request. They were like, oh, you need to watch this series called Sex Pistols. And I was like, Sex Pistols? And so I looked it up at the time, and the manga is actually called Love Pistols. The manga came out around 2004 to 2005, and then switched publishers from 2006 to 2007. And it's actually a 10-volume manga series. And then the OVA was released in 2010. So that's where the 2010 is coming in. It's technically from the 2000s, but the OVA is from the 2010s. So just barely skirting the surface there and getting into a more recent edition there. But did I go and buy all 10 volumes online digitally? I did. Have I read them yet? No. I was going to react to this OVA, and then it's a 2-part OVA. It's 2 episodes. I was going to react to the OVA and then go back afterwards and read the 10 volumes of the manga and then come back, sit down, have my dress on, and talk about the manga series after we talk about the OVAs. So, because I have a theory, my theory, of course, is that what's going to happen is, as I'm taking notes, I'm going to realize that there have been elements of this OVA that are either left out or not expanded upon because they're in the manga. So usually when you have an OVA like this, like Fake, for example, Fake adapted the story from volume 2 of its manga, and that was the OVA. And so after I watched the OVA, I was like, oh, I need to go read the manga. And so I did. So I have a feeling that this OVA is probably going to adapt like the first couple of volumes, and then I need to go back and read volumes, 3 through 10 or whatever. But I have all 10 volumes. I bought them officially. I'm supporting the official release. And so I was excited. I was like, okay, I'm going to go back, read the 10 volumes after I'm done watching this OVA. I know nothing about it. The only reason I picked it for JanuYaoi was because it's been recommended for so long. And I was like, yeah, I'm probably never going to get around to it with the other shows I'm watching. So it's just 2 episodes. Why not? It's like an hour long altogether. I just watched like an hour and 45 minutes movie the other week, so this should be totally fine. So I'm pretty excited, although I am curious why we changed the name from Love Pistols to Sex Pistols for the OVA, unless it was just something like with copyright and Love Pistols already existed, and they're like, well, we'll just call it Sex Pistols and it'll be fine. And it sounds more risque that way, right? I will say, I'm a little bit nervous because when I watched Winter Cicada last week, when I watched Fake, there was no viewer discretion is advised because Fake is a really cute, chaste as yaoi can be, story. And then Winter Cicada, there was a mature warning, like, oh, mature audiences, you had to click and say you were a certain age. And I was like, huh. And things got down to business real quickly in that series. So when I went to go click on the episode here, as y'all will see, yeah, about that. It gave me the viewer discretion warning, and I was like, okay. So, just to forewarn you, I've got the link to the 2 episodes down below in the description, but I have no clue what I'm getting into. I'm going into this blind. The covers of the manga have people with animals. Like, there's a guy in volume 1, and there's like a snow leopard with him. So I don't know if it's like a fruits basket thing, if it's more like a zodiac thing, but a snow leopard isn't in the zodiac, so I'm not sure how that works. But that's the only thing I know is that every volume cover of Sex Pistols, of Love Pistols, there is an animal involved. So I don't know. I have no clue what I'm about to get into, but that's why we have JanuYaoi, right? Because it's either going to be great or it's going to be crazy awkward, and we're going to talk about it. So I have the last of my eggnog from the holiday season. What a testament to January when you're just finishing off the last of the eggnog. So I'm excited, y'all. Let's do this. I've dawdled enough, but we are going to start Sex Pistols Part 1 and Part 2. and see what all the hubbub is about, why y'all recommended this. I feel like either you all recommend things to me for one of two reasons. Either it's really good and you want me to watch it, or it's really traumatizing and you want me to suffer. So we'll see which one it is, but we're going to start that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's find out. What did I just watch? Okay, full disclosure. Okay, I know what alpha, beta, omega verse is. I know what that is. I've read enough fan fiction to know. And I don't have any problem with it, first and foremost. Like, y'all read what you want to read. I have no problem with it. I just didn't expect that that's what we're going into. So if you don't know what ABO is, you probably just research that. But I mean, I have no judgment against it. I'm fine with it. It's fine. But I had no clue that's what I was getting into. And then the thing about it is, in the first episode, the thing about it is that they don't give you any world building. They assume that which granted, this came out in 2009, 2010. The series came out in 2004, 2005. So they're like, it's been out for 5 years. Why haven't you read it already? Because they don't give you any world building. They just throw you into the deep end, and they're like, hope you can swim, hope you know what's going on. And I know enough about that genre that I'm like, okay, I kind of get what they're dishing out here. But if you had no clue, if you were like, wait, what's with this leopards? Why'd he turn into a cat? What's going on? Then, like I said, it's like if B-Stars and Fruits Basket and the ABO universe just got together and was like, hey, it's party time. So oh my gosh. So the first episode, they just throw you in the deep end. They don't give you any context. They're just like, know these characters, know what's happening. And you're like, and then by the second episode, they're like, okay, you figured it out. So here's all this other crazy stuff. And the thing with McBear, I'm about to die. McBear, the grizzly from America, who's a total prick until he's not a total prick, but he's still a total prick. And Teruhiko's just fine with it. I'm like, what? I kept getting Teruhiko and Oshuo confused because they kind of look similar until you see them in separate scenes and you're like, oh wait, no, they don't look similar. Never mind. Oh my God. God. And the second episode just goes off the rails and it's just bonkers. And then the whole thing with McBear. And then of course they have a backstory. Of course, I met you 6 years ago at the community bears party. The fact that it was translated into community bears party, it's the funniest damn thing I've heard of all week. And I'm not gonna get over community bears party for a while because I just imagine all these bears. They're like, it was just from all over the globe, just hanging out. Community bears party, and that's where he fell in love with them. And then they met out of coincidence in an arranged marriage 6 years later. Who knew? Oh my God. And so yeah, if you're familiar with Omegaverse, they try to explain, because there's a lot of male pregnancy in that series. It's like a trope. And they some series explain it, some writers of the genre explain it, others don't. But they explain it here. It's like a parasite. Okay. I feel like I need to read the manga now just to be like, what is this madness? What have I signed up for? I bought 10 volumes of this! Thank you, Patreon. You bought me 10 volumes of this. I'm going to go read here in a minute. And then it'll probably take me a couple days, and then I'll come back and talk to you all about it. But thank you for your contribution. JanuYaoi. Okay. In all seriousness, we are going to go through that damn chart at the end there. But yeah, the first episode, they just throw you in the deep end, and then they're like, at the end of the episode, they're like, oh, hey, by the way, here's this guy like on a kids' TV show explaining everything you needed to know from the start at the end of the episode. I'm like, why didn't we start with this? If you weren't going to have Madarame teach Norio this, and you could have at least had the guy at the beginning do it to the kids. Because I love that this series is somewhat self-aware. I'm very curious if the manga is self-aware of just how bonkers this is. Because in the show at the end, the little girl's like, I don't get it. And I'm like, we're all in the same boat. Great. So yeah, so Madarame and Kunimasa are half brothers, and their last name is Madarame. I get that. I forget what the actual name of the snake boy is. I think it's like, is it Junshiro? Is it him? What's his name? I'm trying to find out if they establish it and they say what his name is. But yeah, but interesting. Oh, wait. I had it, and I lost it. Oh my gosh, really? Come on now. Okay, so yeah, we're talking about the girls having... Yonekuni. Okay, I'm going to write that down. Yonekuni and Kunimasa are brothers. They have the same mom. And so apparently there's two different species. There are humans, which are called ape men in this case, and the idea is they've evolved from apes. That's the story's premise. And then there are the Madara that evolve from other animals, not just ape men, but can be from different animals like snakes or bears or wolves. And the idea is that the Madara, they can have sex with each other, but not really with humans. With humans, it doesn't do anything, right? Okay. And the idea is that the ape men don't know the Madara exist, and they don't need to, and the Madara don't want the humans to know that they exist either. So, okay. That makes sense. I got it. So Kunimasa and Madarame, Yonekuni, are half brothers. They have the same mom, who is a snake, and then Yonekuni's dad was a dragon. And although the one guy says a crocodile, so I find that interesting. Is it a dragon or is it a crocodile? And then Kunimasa was part monkey, I think so. Yeah, monkey. Yeah, a monkey. No, snow leopard and snake. Snow leopard and snake. Oshuo is the snake and the monkey together. Okay, so Oshuo, I guess by monkey they mean Oshuo, one of his parents was a snake and the other parent was a human. So I guess they can have kids. It's just not as common. And then Norio is what they call a returner to ancestry, which means he's born from human parents, but he's actually able to be a Madara. It's like a rare thing. And he's like a cat. Like a cat. And when they said part monkey, they meant like he was human. Okay. They keep saying, when they say monkeys in this world, in this story, they're not referring to apes. They're actually referring to humans, not the actual monkey. Okay. It's like, all right, fine. Gotcha. Okay. So we've got all that. And then Fujiwara. I really liked Fujiwara's character at first. I liked Fujiwara's character towards the end. But the part where he was basically aware that he was seducing and taking advantage of Yonekuni, at that part I was like, Fujiwara, no, not cool. Not cool at all. And Kunimasa knew about it. I was like, why? You weirdos. So yeah, and then Oshuo. So Oshuo is friends with Fujiwara and tries to be a lover to him, and then Yonekuni is like, no. So it's like, okay. And Norio is getting together with Kunimasa, but Teruhiko, who's the bear, he originally liked Norio until he met McBear, the American grizzly, old McBear. I was like, God, I can't. And he was such a prick. And then he wasn't, and then he was, and then he still was. But I feel like I feel like I lucked out with Fake and Winter Cicada because they're both actually pretty good BL series. This BL series is bonkers. But it's fine, but there's tropes in it that I'm like, this is what, when people talk about BL tropes that are questionable, I'm like, okay, the whole dubious consent thing, yes, very, very problematic. And so it's like, okay. And in Yonekuni's defense, with the whole thing, his whole view of sex is kind of established as a character trait for him, right? It's not good. It's a flaw, a major character flaw. But it's established early on with the women that he's always with that he just views sex as like a pre-sleep routine. Like he just has to get it on so that he'll sleep better. That's literally what he's using these women for. He's just like, I'm going to have sex with you and I'll sleep better. And the women seem okay with that because they keep coming back to him. So it's clearly consensual. between them. But for him, he's just like, he's had so much sex that his body's just used to it. And then he's part, and they establish that there's like all this stuff with like aquatic, like he's 2 aquatic types, like the snake and the dragon. So whenever it gets cold, he's like basically weak and like sleepwalks. And so he kept sleepwalking over to Fujiwara's place because Fujiwara is a Madara and he was attracted to him. And then Fujiwara kind of took advantage of him. And it's like, but okay. And then, yeah, I felt bad for Fujiwara up until a point, and then I was kind of mad at him because he was aware that he was taking advantage of Yonekuni. And for the longest time, it was very odd and confusing because you're like, was he taking advantage of Yonekuni or was this all a dream? No, it was real. Oh my God. And then the whole thing with Teruhiko and them just, his family selling him out to have a grandchild. And I'm guessing that the dad maybe had Teruhiko too late and he had complications from it. I don't know. There's an interesting conversation there, and see, so much of this I want to see in the manga, because I'm like, okay, the manga's probably going to expand on it and like all the politics and things, because they say that it costs, for a Madara woman to have a baby, it costs 50 million yen, but for a man, it costs 10 million. So I feel like there's a commentary there on like women versus men in this society and kind of their value or something along those lines. I feel like there's commentary being made there about why it's costing a woman so much to have a child and it's costing a man so little. So basically they were going to, I see what they're saying. They were going to hire a woman. They were going to arrange a marriage with Teruhiko and a woman, but the woman in the arranged marriage was going to cost 50 million yen because she had to physically have the baby, and she was going to make them pay for all the medical bills and all the things with the hospital and if there was any complications, things like that. And they're like, the mom's like, we don't want to spend $50 million for you to get this woman knocked up. No, we're going to have a guy come in and you're going to have the baby and it's only going to cost us 10 million. We're going to save a fifth of the cost. So there's an interesting commentary there. But yeah. And then, of course, Teruhiko tries to convince Norio to help him out and pass him off as his partner. And Norio's nice, and he's like, sure, I'll do this. And then, God, the McBear just like slings him around. I was like, nope. And then, of course, they fall in love because community bear party. I do like in this that Norio seems very gender fluid, and I kind of like that, because at first I was like, in all the illustrations they show Norio like in pink overalls, and Norio looks smaller, more demure, but Norio's still a guy. So I do appreciate in as early as 2004 there was this like open gender fluidity. I think that's cool, and I like Norio's character a lot. Some of these voice actors sounded really familiar. I was like, I know they've been in other things, but and I like Teruhiko a lot. I like his character. I feel bad for Teruhiko in most of this. But this was madness. Complete madness. And I have 10 volumes of manga to get through to talk more about the madness. But before I go off and read that manga, I do want to go back to episode 1 to this whole thing with the chart and everything. Study time. Yes, please. I like these, like, pay close attention. I'm like, you need to in this. So, okay. There are Madara types for kids. Okay. Humans can be divided into 2 broad groups. 8 men are normal people and Madara. Okay. Gotcha. All of your friends and myself are Madara. Okay, so that's explaining that to them. Just as many humans evolved from apes, other humans evolved from different kinds of animals. All right, and so apparently there's 6 different types. Okay. And then it's that monkeys or 8 men are unable to distinguish Madara. They see everyone as humans too. Okay, so the shape of your soul, that whole thing that was being addressed. So the shape of your soul, the Madara, when they are talking about the shape of your soul, they're like, what animal are you? So are you a snake? Are you a bear? Are you a wolf? They can distinguish different types, but humans only see everyone as humans. All right? And I do think it's clever that they use the monkeys and they have see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. I do like that. So the whole thing with the spell, I was like, oh, God, now we're getting magic involved. But yeah, I do like the idea of the hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil. That little kind of, I like that is in this to kind of explain how humans don't recognize the Madara. I'm like, okay, cool. I like it. But then, yeah. So then we get this concept, like, what the heck? Okay. And so they can't see the soul, they can't hear the voice of the soul, and they can't speak to the soul. So yeah, so the humans can't recognize Madara, and the Madara can speak to each other's souls. Cool. They can't know that the Madara exists. So yeah, as far as any human is concerned, everybody looks like humans, and they don't know any different. So then they get into this chart here, and I was like, what are we even doing? Madara are divided into types depending on the animal that they harbor in their soul. Okay. And so there are mermaids. Okay. Mermaids, and there's like a representation that looks like a fish. Dragons, which look like a croc. So the mermaids, okay, mermaids look like fish. There are dragons, which look like crocodiles. That's what that guy was referring to. There are werecats, which is like the snow leopard that Kunimasa is. Then there are snakes' eyes. Okay. That I guess are lizards and things like that. And then bear oaks, which are like the bears. And then dog deities. Okay. And the dog deities is like what Fujiwara is. And then Norio is also a werecat, I'm assuming. Okay. Yep. So the mermaid is interesting because I don't think we've seen a mermaid type yet. We've seen every type on here except the mermaid. The mermaid we don't really get yet. So that's curious because the drawing for the mermaid is kind of bizarre. I'm like, what is that supposed to represent? What are we doing with that? All right. So that part made sense. I was like, cool, got it. And then there are degrees of strength between them. Okay. So within the categories. And humans are like on the whole spectrum. Humans are like just on the whole spectrum, right? So, okay, mermaids are only, and there's different types of seeds that they say. So like different seeded strengths. There's heavy, middle, and light. Okay. And it looks like mermaids are only heavy. And then snakes and dragons can be all across the board. And then dogs are usually middle or light. Okay. And then bears can be heavy or middle. All right. And then werecats, cats and snakes and dragons can be anything. Okay. Interesting. So I was like, okay, fine. That all makes relatively sense. They're further divided into heavy seed, middle seed, and light seed, depending on their level of strength. Okay, cool. Gotcha. So dragons and dogs are weaker. Bears and snow leopards are stronger. Okay, got it. Heavy seeds tend to... So this is like alpha, beta, omega, essentially, right? And so heavy seeds tend to have difficulty conceiving children. Okay. And then you get this damn... pyramid of what the hell. So mermaids and returners to ancestry are at the very top. Okay, so mermaids and returners to ancestry. Okay. So rare. Okay. All right, so this pyramid makes a little bit more sense. Okay. So, all right. So the mermaids are like the rarest, which I'd assume that makes sense. And then the returners to ancestry, which is what Norio is, they are the most rare. And it says they are the least likely to reproduce. Okay, so that's why they're so rare, because you're not going to get very many of them. Whereas like dogs and werecats and dragons and snakes are pretty common. Interesting. Okay. And then, yeah, so, it's alpha, beta, omega, basically. This is what this is. This is essentially what this is. Okay. Okay. But now I'm like, is Teruhiko going to have a kid? I'm like, wait. And this girl's face! I absolutely love it! The girl's face, after they do that big pyramid, she's like... this show is so self-aware of how bonkers it is, right? So, okay. And so basically the rarer they are, the more attractive they are to other Madeira. Okay. And there's one exception to this, and this guy, like, and the exception is the return to ancestry. Okay. Okie dokie. So, alright, and that's pretty much it. So I really am curious now what all we're going to find out about this manga now that we've had this preview of this OVA. But, oh my gosh. So, yeah, I'm going to go off and read 10 volumes of this manga now and come back and talk to you all and tell you what I've learned. So, I'll be right back. It's fine. It's fine. Hey, so I'm back. So, I read the 10 volumes of Love Pistols, and I may have gotten a slight migraine from it. And I'm here to come back and talk to you about it and explain the very simple, very easy to understand world that I have spent the last 10 volumes diving into. So, if you've not met Whiteboard-kun, this is Whiteboard-kun. Whiteboard-kun is my assistant in all things needing to be explained. And so I usually use Whiteboard-kun for Attack on Titan. This is the first show that's not Attack on Titan I've brought Whiteboard-kun out for. What fun, right? God. Okay, so it turns out that the OVA is covering most of the first volume into the second volume. And very similar to the OVA, this story doesn't just come out and tell you what's going on. It makes you wait a little bit. Now, it does give you the information that we get in the episode. It's just through like little handy-dandy manga charts instead of like the guy in the kids video. But this whole series is mind-boggling. I felt like if you've ever watched Attack on Titan, it's the basement times 2. And you think to yourself, you're like, Romania, there's no way. Like, there's no way that that's possible. But let me explain. It's very simple, Scylla. It's a very simple concept, really. It's really simple once you figure it all out to go through everything. So, let's start from the basics. So, we have that little triangle, that pyramid that was given to us at the start of this whole jamboree. And it is very much like alpha, beta, omega style stuff. So, I'm going to, for simplicity's sake, say that the most common type are the light seeds, or you could call them omega, I guess, in a sense, but it's more than that, but they're the most common. And in the middle seeds are like the betas kind of, and they're like average, typically what you find. And then the alphas are kind of like the heavy seeds, and they're less common, and they're less likely to have a kid, and they're a little bit more rare. And then at the very top of the pyramid, you have the Mers. Don't even get me started on the Mer people. We're going to talk about the Mer people. But there's the Mers, and then the returners to ancestry are the ones that come from humans, but are the English translation, the official English translation calls them Zoomins, which I think is one of the dumbest things. Like, Madara, I get. Madara just sounds, Madara sounds fine. But Zoomins instead of humans, it sounds like when people are, like, making fun of dogs, and they're like, oh, hello, human, except it's Zoomin. That's all I could think of. And I'm like, this series. Okay. So that's kind of the whole deal here. The one thing about this story is that everything is pretty gender fluid, right? Like, women can have children, guys can have children, men can become women. There's a whole slew of things in this whole story. But basically the idea is that everything's gender fluid. You can have a kid no matter what. It just depends on your circumstance, right? And so we have this family tree. This very easy to follow family tree. My dog Santa toy is like slaughtered in the distance, representing my sanity. But yeah, okay, so Norio, old Norio here, and I know I've got this ring of light that's kind of in the way, so it's a little bit, Norio's our ring of light here. Norio is our main character through, I'd say, over half of this series. From volumes 1 through 6, Norio is the main character. Volumes 1 through 6 basically cover Norio's story, primarily. Right, and then after volume 6, things go off the rails. If you didn't think they were off the rails now, they get even more off the rails, but we'll get to that. So Norio Tsuburaya is, and that's why I was getting confused in the OVA, because some people would call Norio by his first name, some would call him by his last name, whatever. But Norio is a returner to ancestry, so they're pretty rare, and they can become a cat. Simple case point. And the whole idea is that it's kind of spiritual. Like they're initially animals, but then they've kind of concentrated their soul to look human, to fool all the other humans. But when they get really excited or horny or whatever, then they turn back to their animal forms, and the idea is to control that, the shape of your soul, essentially, what have you. So that's why they become animals. That's explained. Norio instantly falls in love with Kunimasa Madarame, which, for the record, Kunimasa, I liked him more in the OVA. In the manga, I'm not much of a fan. In the manga, he's kind of a jerk. And he's really shy, and they play it off a lot of times as he's shy and quiet, but I'm like, no, he's a jerk. He womanizes and gallivants around with all these women. His only concern is furthering the family legacy, furthering the family line. And for a while, it seems like he only likes Norio because Norio is a rare breed. And that's the only reason why he wants Norio to have his kid, because he's like, oh, we'll further the family line because of this. It's like, okay. And yeah, you can argue that by the end of Volume 6, Kunimasa kind of realizes that he likes Norio for real and doesn't just want Norio to use him, but it's still questionable. I'm like, Kunimasa, not a big fan. But he's a jaguar, not a snow leopard. He's a jaguar. And all the blues are... The Madarame family is ridiculous. The Madarame family, they're kind of like there's no royalty in this series, but if there was a royal family, it would be the Madarames. And it's like keeping up with the Madarames. This is like the most family drama that I've ever experienced in a series. It blows others out of the water. So Kunimasa is the son of this hoe, Makio. She is a piece of work. She's a snake. Definitely a snake. And Kunimasa is the son of Makio, who's a piece of work. And she kind of becomes like the Aikido of Fruits Basket to Norio, if that makes sense. And so Makio, hear me out on this. Get ready for this family drama. So Makio got with this this English architect named David Woolville, who's a jaguar as well. And David's the sculptor. David is the sculptor. He's an American sculptor, David is. And David's a jaguar, and him and Makio had Kunimasa. Easy to do. Makio also has a relationship with Maximilian Seymour, who is a European architect and is a dragon. And in this world, the dragons are like crocodiles. Like in Fruits Basket, they're seahorses. But they can't be seahorses in this world because that ties to the Mers. We'll get to the Mers. But David is a dragon, which is basically a crocodile or an alligator. That's how they do dragons in this. And him and Makio got together, and they had Yonikuni, which was the snake that was with Fujiwara, who is the wolf, right? And Fujiwara is friends with Norio. It's like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon in this. So that seems complicated enough, right? So Makio got with these two different guys. No, it gets better. The two guys, they fall in love with each other, and then Maximilian has Hidekuni with David, and he's a jaguar too. So Hidekuni is Kunimasa's half-brother, but Kunimasa's father is Hidekuni's... No, let me get this right. David is the dad in both scenarios, and then Maximilian is the mother to Hidekuni, but the father to Yonikuni. And then, with that, so Hidekuni just kind of like goes off into a little space over here, and there's a plot point where Hidekuni tries to get Norio to like him instead of his brother, because Hidekuni's like, I'm not really tied to any royal nobility with the Madarames. I'm just out here by myself, so you can love me and I love you for who you are and not because you're a premium breed. And Norio kind of goes along with it for a while, but then Kunimasa's like, no, I love him, and it's like, shut up. So then, in addition, Makio, in addition to being in a relationship with both David and Maximilian, who are in a relationship with each other and had Hidekuni, Makio also is in a relationship with this woman named Karen Togashiki, who I think is a cat. I don't quite remember. And Togashiki, Karen ends up being the caretakers of Yonakune and Kunimasa because Makio is a hoe and doesn't want to take care of any kids. So Karen ends up getting a relationship with Makio, and they have a relationship. And then Karen has a child with Makio. Karen has Monami, and Monami is Kunimasa and Yonikune's brother, who is also a cat. And in the manga, Monami kind of looks like a girl, looks very feminine, and so at first Norio thinks that Monami is a girl, but then we find out it's a brother. So there's that. So there's basically Monami, Unikuni, and Kunimasa, and Hidekuni are all half-siblings somehow in this web through Makio. And we'll come back to Makio, so just keep Makio in mind. She's twisted, she's weird, I don't like her character, but she's like connected to everything. Karen is related to the Togashiki cousins who are mongoose, and they have twin children named Ume and Shima who are mongoose too. And Shima ends up falling for this guy who's a surgeon named Taisho Aogiri, who is a snake. And it's kind of a funny little side story because Shima and Taisho, it's a snake and a mongoose. You know, they're mortal enemies, but it's like opposites attract, and they end up wanting to be together, and they end up getting together, and they have a set of twins named Shimako and Masaru. One is a snake and one is a mongoose. And there is kind of like a cute little thing where it's like they're twins, but one's the size of a mongoose and one's the size of a snake. It's also revealed in this world that when these babies are born, when all these Madara are born, they actually look like the animals and they slowly take on human appearance. It just sometimes, they establish that snakes turn into humans quicker than other animals. And it's like, okay, so there's that established. But Taisho, the surgeon, who's the snake, is friends with Oshuo, and Oshuo was friends with Fujiwara back in the OVA, and he was the guy that Yonekune was jealous of. Tie back to that story, right? So yeah, Monami's going to come back in this, but in this whole volumes 1 through 6, it's kind of established there's a big web, and Norio meets all the rest of the Madarame family. It's very Fruits Basket-ish, only weird and 20,000 times more bonkers. And we also have Norio's friend Teruhiku, who's the bear, who's in love with Joshua McBear, who's the grizzly bear too. And they have their own little side plot, but honestly, the OVA covers 90% of their story. 90% of the story in the OVA is Teruhiku and Joshua's story and the rest of the manga. So if you were clamoring for more Joshua and McBear and Teruhiku storyline, you're not going to get it in this manga, because it's just like, they just show up like a couple, and they're like, hey guys, we're here. They don't have a kid in the manga yet, so it's like, that whole plot is not happening at the moment. But yeah, so there's that. But the story in volumes 1 through 6 primarily goes through Norio and Kunimasa's relationship. And around the time of volume 6, we get introduced to Shinobu. But I'm not going to touch on Shinobu yet. Shinobu is a big part of this, but not yet. So, in the midst of all this madness, around volume 5, right before we get to the conclusion, it's like the author takes a detour, and the author's like, hey, before I wrap up this whole main storyline with Norio, I want to introduce Shima, the mongoose's friend, Higashira. Higashira is just a random character that's introduced, and they have a kid when they're introduced, a kid, Suzumi. And then through the course of the rest of volume 4 into volume 5, we come to find out that Higashira was in love with this person named Seth. And Seth is half Saudi Arabian, half French. I feel like in Japanese literature, in anime and manga, anytime they want to make a character not look like the ethnicity that they are half of, the other half is always French. Have you noticed that? Tamaki in Ouran High School Host Club, he's half French. The guy in Fake, he may not have been half French, but I feel like he was. And in this, Seth is half French, and he looks French. He looks European. And so he looks very different than the rest of his family in this. And Seth is half hawk, half snake. And the hawk apparently is from the French side of him. And apparently you find out in this story that amidst all of the different types of Madara, the flying ones are pretty rare. There's not a lot of bird types in this world. So the hawk thing is really rare, and so are bats. They're very rare. They're very hardly found in this world. And so Seth, I don't like his character at all. Seth is really problematic. He just wants to be in a relationship with Higashira because Higashira is a bat and is rare. It's kind of a mirror of the Norio and Kunimasa scenario. It's kind of a mirror of that, except this goes the more questionable route, because at least with Kunimasa and Norio, Kunimasa kind of vocalizes his love for Norio and kind of on his own comes to grips with it. Seth is like a big gaslighter. I don't like Seth's character at all, because he kidnaps Higashira basically and puts him in his harem. Also, there's a whole side plot with Seth and the whole Saudi Arabian thing. It's kind of stereotypical and really uncomfortable and awkward. And reading it, I was like, this is really uncomfortable and awkward and stereotypical. Like, there's a harem, and it's like the ED of Free season 1, where you're like, sure we want to do this, and it goes there. But anyway, so Seth basically kidnaps Higashira and makes him have their kid, and then Higashira runs away before the kid's born, and then Seth comes and finds him at this big family gathering friendly picnic, and then it's a whole big deal. And then by the end of it, Higashira realizes that, oh wait, I love Seth and he's gonna be nice to me, blah blah blah. But the weird thing about all of this in this scenario is that we come to find out that yeah, we got introduced to the whole the parasitic thing, that's like the parasitic womb that can be used for like the guys to have kids in this world. Well, that's not the only thing that's introduced. There's also like creams, patches, and pills that can change, that can cause your gender to change. And so Higashira has constantly been given this like cream over time that turns him into a woman. Mm-hmm. So that's a thing. That's a thing in this world. It's brought up with Higashira. It's never brought up again. And it's just a MacGuffin that we get explained once, and then the author chooses not to use that again. So it's like, okay, cool, fine. But anyway, so that's volumes 1 through 6. We have that whole weird scenario introduced for like a volume, like a side story. And then Norio, at the end of volume 6, Kunimasa says that he's thinking about asking Norio to get married to him. And it's like, okay. And Makio shows up, and she wants Kunimasa to get married to a woman, and because it's going to be better for the family line. And we get introduced to the character of Shinobu. And I really like Shinobu in this. Shinobu, it's like the author has had this like Fruits Basket-esque story for 6 volumes. And then in volume 7, Shinobu goes on a side quest, and it becomes a totally different David Lynchian Twin Peaks-esque story. And I'm like, where's this been the whole time? So Shinobu is the son of Kunimitsu Madarame and is the brother of Makio. So Makio is the older sister, and this is Shinobu is Kunimasa's uncle, and is also the son of the head of the Madarame family, which is Kunimitsu. And Kunimitsu wants Kunimasa to take over instead of Shinobu. Shinobu's kind of denounced the whole family line. Shinobu has no interest in becoming the heir to the Madarame family, so it goes to Makio's son, Kunimasu, instead. Yay. Because Yonekuni is younger than Kunimasa, so Kunimasa's technically the oldest heir. That's how that all works out. But Shinobu's story starts in volume 7, and it turns out that Kunimitsu has some tie-in with the mer people. And this whole time they've been talking about the mermaids. And I was like, oh, what are the mermaids? When we get to the mermaids in this story, they're kind of like the big, like, noble, ethereal race of Madara that are just, it gets weird. If you didn't think this was weird to begin with the Mer storyline in volume 7, it starts to get really weird. And it gets very surreal and very David Lynchian to the point where I'm like, what is happening? So Shinobu is sent to this mansion in place of his father, because his father, it seems like it's outside of Japan because his father has established that he can't leave Japan, so Shinobu goes in his place, and Makio has no interest in going, so he's just sent instead. And he meets Kanarino, who we find out is a mermaid, Kanarino, and then Kanarino introduces him to Vulnera, and Vulnera, or VB as they call him, is a mermaid / lion, is half lion, half mermaid, and is an abomination of nature, apparently. So we establish in this world that the mer people kind of like, mers are not really, they can take a physical form, but they're very spiritual. They're like kind of celestial like beings, and they can take human form like Kanarino does, but they have to like focus their soul into it or something. Their soul is vast and expansive. And Vulnera is like an abomination of nature. He shouldn't exist. The mer people apparently are not supposed to mix with the other Zumans, the other Madara, but Vulnera is the result of that union. He's kind of like an abomination. His soul can't take a proper shape, and so they like give him like an avatar, and the avatar is the size of a mansion. Like his consciousness is so big, it fills up an entire mansion. And so within the mansion, he can take like a physical form. and kind of interact with Shinobu that way. But it's the mangaka does a really cool thing with VB, with Volnera, in that anytime you see Volnera in the mansion, their outline is kind of wavy and distorted, and their body doesn't quite look right, and it's because they don't really have a physical form. They're just like, their consciousness is inside the mansion where they're at, and that's how he interacts with people. But of course, Volnera falls in love with Shinobu. And Volnera, it is very reminiscent of Hans Christian Andersen's Little Mermaid. It's very reminiscent of the original Little Mermaid, because Volnera kind of says, if I don't find a way to take shape and have my soul take a human form, then I'm going to turn into sea foam and I'll just cease to exist in this plane of existence, and I'll just roam around like a spiritual entity. And it's like, oh, okay. And so he wants to get to know Shinobu and basically experience the world. It's like the Little Mermaid. He wants to experience the world, and he falls in love with Shinobu. But Kanarino doesn't like that, because he doesn't think Volnera is strong enough to maintain that physical form. And he's like, if you get with Shinobu and you try to maintain that physical form, it's going to possibly distort time and space. So again, super surreal and weird. But Kanarino finds out that Shinobu is hesitant to get into a relationship with Volnera, not because he doesn't love Volnera, but because he has no experience with love himself, so he doesn't know how he can help Volnera. He's like, well, I can't. Volnera wants to experience all this physical love, and he's like, I've never physically been in love with anybody, so I don't know what to do. So, in Shinobu's wisdom, he asks Kanarino to have sex with him. He's like, I want you to make love to me, and that way I'll know, so I can be of help to Volnera. And I'm like, okay. And Kanarino realizes that Volnera is probably going to see this, because apparently all the mer people are psychically linked. They can go through time and space and connect with one another instantly. And so there's actually in volume 8 a really good scene. It's probably my favorite in the whole manga. And in the scene, Kanarino, he tells Shinobu to close his eyes while they have sex, because he's like, if your eyes are open, they're windows to the soul, and if your eyes are open and you watch me, Volnera, because he's made this connection with you, can watch me and he'll know that I'm with you. So close your eyes and then Volnera won't know. Okay? So, however, the other mer people catch wind of all this going down, and they don't like Volnera, because Volnera is not a full-blood mer person. He's only half. He's half lion. And they decide that they're going to play a joke, like a cruel joke on Volnera, and they open up. As I'm telling you all this sounds bonkers, because it is. And I had to read 10 volumes of this, so I'm going to make you all listen to it too. But they open like this rift in time and space, and they're like, look, Volnera, he's with Kanarino. And Volnera, there's a moment where Kanarino is like over the top of Shinobu, about to have sex with him, and Volnera like opens the rip in time and space and looks down on them, and Kanarino takes his hand and like swipes him away, and he's like, stop looking. And it's really well done. It's a really cool, creepy moment, but I was like, what is happening? And so yeah, in the end, Shinobu and Volnera have a heart-to-heart, and Shinobu's like, look, I don't love Kanarino, but I didn't know how to teach you the ways of the world, so I thought I needed to have experience so that I could tell you about it. And so it's bizarre. And then the end, it seems like Shinobu also has a thing where he's wanting to get his father's approval, and his father's like, you need to kill Volnera, because Volnera is a freak of nature and is like an abomination. You need to get rid of him. And so Shinobu takes a sword, this magically imbued sword that's supposed to kill mer people. It's supposed to transcend the realms of time and space and kill mer people. And he basically slices Volnera and thinks that he kills him. But he doesn't. And so where this story goes from there is that as I'm reading volume 8, I'm like, okay, I have 2 volumes left. How are we tying this back to old Norio? Because for a while, for volumes 1 through 6, it was like just a basic weird love story, and it had this weird family tree involved, and then this like supernatural Omegaverse stuff to it, and I was like, okay. And then volume 7 and 8 happen with these mermaids, and it's like, okay, well, there's this surreal celestial stuff going on. What do we do now? And then it ties back, because Volnera, somehow up here at the top of the pyramid, if you're a mer, you have some kind of easier connection with the return to ancestry people. And so Volnera connects to Norio, because he knows Norio is connected to Kunimasa. And he's like, oh, hey, this guy that you're thinking about marrying, I need to talk to his uncle. Can you help me find Shinobu so I can talk to him? And then Norio goes to Shinobu, they reconnect, they figure out that they love each other, they'll be together forever, la la la. And at the end of volume 8, I was like, okay, We tied all the threads together. What we doing now? We got 2 more volumes left. What else are we going to do? And then volumes 9 and 10 happen. And the author's like, hey, you know these characters that you've been following around through most of this story? Yeah, remember that one, like, guy that was a waiter that worked for the Madarame family, like, way back in volume 1? What if he was a main character now? And so they make Inukai, who's this dog Madara, who works for Kunimasa's family, the Madarame family. They make him a main character, but he's not even a main character. He's one of the main characters in the story, but the story's really about his friends, Issei, Milo, or Issei, Izuru, and Rinda, right? So we meet, in the start of volume 9, we meet Inukai again, and Inukai is friends with Izuru, Rinda, and Issei. And Issei becomes our protagonist of volumes 9 and 10. Why not? And Issei is a snake. There's lots of snakes in this world. I think snakes are like one of the more common Madara, because almost everybody's part snake in this world, seemingly. Unless they're a dog or a cat, they're like part snake, and that's like the most common one. So Issei is a snake, and he's friends with Izuru and Rinda and Inukai, and Izuru and Rinda are in a relationship together. And it kind of starts out where they're kind of like in a threesome, and then Issei breaks off, and Issei falls in love with his language arts teacher. He's a high school student that falls in love with his teacher. He's got the hots for teach, and he falls in love with Issa Kanamori, who is a tanuki, or like a red panda. And so he falls in love with this language arts teacher, but all of his advances aren't working. Nothing seems to be going his way. And you're like, okay, so why doesn't Issa like Issei? Well, the thing of it is, Issa does like Issei, but we established way back in the OVA and in volume 1 that there's these things called blinds, and it's basically where like an alpha character basically puts a restraint on a Omega character, something where they can't do anything. They basically have to listen to whatever they say. It's problematic. But anyway, so Issa has a blind on them, and Issei figures it out, and he's like, somebody is keeping Issa from being in a relationship with anybody else. And so he goes on this quest to find out who it is, and he finds out who it is. It's his counselor, Ryui Mibu. The counselor at the high school has this blind on the teacher Issa, right? Okay. So by the end of volume 9, Issei's like, okay, my counselor is having this relationship with Issa. Issa is not consensual with it. I need to save Issa because he clearly isn't happy. Fine. Seems fair. Issei's going to do this. So we find out in the midst of all this that Issei's father is a character named Ryusei Kagashi. And so Issei basically gets Issa away from Mibu, and he confesses his love, and he's like, I'm going to help you, everything confess. And then he locks hands with Issa, and then all hell breaks loose. Like, all this crazy, like, restraint, celestial energy stuff starts flying around the screen on the panels of the manga, and somehow they're locked together, and Kanamori's a bomb that could destroy time and space. Okay? And then we find out that Ryui was just mainly keeping tabs on him, and that Ryui's in a relationship with this guy named Okita, who's friends with Ryusei, who is Issei's dad and grew up with him. And then Ryusei's in love with Haruki Madarame, who is a mer person, it turns out. But wait! They're a mer person, but they've been posing this whole time under a different moniker. It's established that these mer people, because everything's gender fluid, and because it's like the mer people, because they transcend time and space, they can have multiple souls inside of them, and they can have both male and female souls, and Haruki's female soul was actually Makio Madarame. So it all ties back together. Ah! And then Issei's like, well, screw all this. I don't understand what's going on, but I just want to be with Issa. And then they transcend time and space. And he's like, screw it. I'm going to blow everybody up with this bomb because I can't take it anymore. And instead of blowing up, he travels into the past, into like a time period in the past, and inhabits like the body of his father through his father's memories. And then we find out how Ryusei and Okita and Haruki had a big love triangle, and that Ryusei, even though he was a snake and he knew that Haruki was a merman, he still wanted to get with him, and they got together in the end. And And so maybe Issei is related to all of them, but I'm not sure. And at this point in the story, at the end of it, it ties back to this like supernatural plane. They go back to like the mer people's world, and Issei are able to get married. And Nori's there, and everybody's there in all this like feudal Japanese wedding garb. And they're like, okay, we're going to get married now. That's the end of it. It's great. We're going to get married. Everything's going to tie together. And then Issei like gets thrown back into the present, into the mortal realm. And I was like, okay, what's going to happen now? And then it's the end of the volume, and that's it for now. And then it literally says, it literally has like a little side story. And it says it's going to pick up with volume 11. But volume 11 doesn't exist yet. So yeah, yep. Very easy story to understand. I'm going to be honest with y'all. When I chose this story, I did not know what I was getting into. And when I got done reading all 10 volumes, I literally had a migraine, and I still kind of do. Because there's so much to this story. And the worst part is it's not complete. And I feel like there's more to it. I feel like the story transitioned from one thing to another, right? It started out with this simple, weird love story between Norio and Kunimasa, and it's transitioned into this like surreal time travel, other species, celestial being side story with these mer people that now I'm like, and the mer thing is kind of cool. Like, I like the kind of surreal aspect of it, that these are like beings that transcend time and space. I think that's a cool thing, but this series doesn't explain it well, and it just throws you in the deep end like it does with all of its world building, to the point where you just feel like you're going insane. I felt like I was losing my mind reading this story, because I've read over the last volume 2 times already, and I still don't understand. I'm like, I feel like either the mangaka has either rushed through this, or they have a clear story in mind, but they don't know what they're going to do with it. And so as I'm looking through volume 9 again here, it's like, there's all these new characters. Like volume 9 and 10, they introduce new characters that I'm like, they've not been here the whole series. Why? And they give some of the characters side stories, and I'm like, okay, fine, be that way. But yeah, Tarako Kotobuki, she's a Tauros. I'm a Tauros too, but girl, honey. And started her mangaka debut in 1998. I feel like this story has been going on for over a decade or 2, and it's still not finished. And I want her to finish it because I need to know. I feel like volumes 1 through 6 was setting up the main story, and volumes 7 and 8 set up the thing with Shinobu that will have importance later on. And this volumes 9 and 10 are setting up another story that's going to connect in some way back, but we just don't know how yet. And that's the frustrating part, is that I'm left wondering as a reader where the story is going to go to. And I've committed myself this far into this madness that I'm like, I want some answers, or at least I want it to end, so I at least know that there's a conclusion, but we're not there yet. So, oh my God. So, do I recommend Sex Pistols and Love Pistols? If ABO is your thing, sure. I feel like every fanfiction has spawned from this story, because this thing goes literally through the gambit with every possible ABO trope you can think of. This story runs the gambit with it. So I'm like, if that's your thing, go for it. Dive down the rabbit hole and welcome to the madness. But I literally got a migraine after reading this. So I was like, this is a lot. I'm glad I didn't start with this one. I thought about starting with this one, honestly. For JanuYaoi, I thought about starting with this one and working backwards. No, I'm glad I chose this one as the next to last edition, because my brain is fried. I feel like I've watched 3 episodes of Attack on Titan, and I'm not even joking, in a row. That's where my brain is. That was the simplified version of what I just told y'all. It goes so many different directions, and it's bonkers. So if that sounds like your type of madness, go for it. But, oh buddy, I'm going to need I'm recording ahead of time, so I'm going to need a couple weeks break before I do the final installment of JanuYaoi. It's going to come out next week, but just know that in the midst of recording, I'm going to take a couple weeks off to gather my wits about me again before I do the final installment. So next week is a mangaka spotlight. On a current yaoi author, a current yaoi mangaka, and so I'm pretty excited to talk about them and their works. There's some questionable elements with their works, but then there's also stuff I really like. So it's funny. It's really funny actually. The 3 yaoi series that I've watched, there are parts of each of them that are going to tie to this last mangaka, and that's pretty exciting. It wasn't intentional, but it's a pretty exciting coincidence. So I'm excited to talk to y'all about it. But in the meantime, I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. I hope y'all enjoyed this reaction. Have a wonderful week. Please take care, stay safe, and I'll talk to y'all again soon with more JanuYaoi. Bye.